Okay, I'm Amy Wilkinson, and I get the opportunity to moderate this panel. And I want to just jump in with the first question to Hannes. Given the cultural shift, the transition, the technology, political, societal changes going on, give us the pulse on Germany or on Europe. How are people perceiving all this turbulence?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Happy to do that. So I think if we look at where we are in at the moment, then I would see and feel that we are somehow torn between courage and fear. Courage, because we do have some fantastic companies. It's the developers in Berlin, it's Sloan in Munich, so great. Fear, political situation, pretty unclear. Trade wars. It is also, are we falling behind other continents, countries? What happens to us? And it feels like a train, but it feels like we are passengers of the train and not the locomotive. I would like to see Europe and Germany being locomotive and being ahead, being a hub for pioneers, for ideas, for growth. And if we then have a look at the facts, we see two things. One is the domestic market in Europe is the biggest in the world. Does it feel like that? Maybe not. That is bad. We should be more confident on that one because it's a great thing to sit on the biggest single domestic market. The other one then, if we look, and that also shows that some sort and some parts of the feeling is right, and it is the most valued and most valuable companies in the world, only 2 European and German companies. That doesn't feel good. That means we are missing future. That all the valuation of companies, 70% is future. Only 30% is actual. So if you're selling 11 million cars, VW, fantastic. But why is Tesla in the valuation higher, bigger? Yeah? So we are missing that future, and we need to realize that we are in the age of digitization. And if we are not playing a role there, we will not play a role in the future. And therefore, we miss that future. We need to go back to that to really be a hub for pioneers, startups, ideas, jobs, and generate more momentum and be more digital. So I really believe this is missing. So I think both are existing, fear, courage.
Okay.
We just need to find a way out of that. But that's where we're sitting. That's at least my assumption.
Okay, and Andrew, so you're at MIT, co-director, co-founder of the initiative on digital economy. What is the pulse in the US? I mean, how would you read the situation now in the United States?
You want the good news or the bad news?
Both.
Both. Okay, so I think there's a great, as Hannes just pointed out, there's kind of a good news, bad news situation happening back home in the US. The good news is that economic growth is overall quite strong. This is the longest peacetime expansion we've ever seen in America. This is the longest string of consecutive months of job growth. So some of the folk that we argue with back in Silicon Valley talk about the robots taking all the jobs. There is no evidence of that yet in the world's biggest, most technologically sophisticated economy. And if there is one economy that's kind of leading the digital revolution, it might not be German as it might be America's. We do have the unicorns. We do have this car company that's valued higher than most of the Germans. So all that's pretty good news back home. The bad news, the challenge, is that growth is extremely uneven. More and more of the economic activity and the vitality in America is coming from a smaller and smaller number of companies. It's happening in a smaller number of cities. It's happening on a smaller geographic footprint. And the thing that worries me back home is that concentration, that unevenness, seems to be accelerating or getting worse instead of getting better. The economy is not kind of evening out all throughout America. It's getting spikier and spikier. And you think, so what? The single statistic that scares me the most on the planet, and I include global warming in this, and global warming is real and bad. The thing that scares me the most is that the sharp rise in deaths of despair back in America during the middle of this huge economic expansion is bizarre. It is terrifying, and I don't think we have a good explanation for it. So we need to innovate because I'm getting close to the panic situation about suicides and drug overdoses back home.
Okay, so you both have described situations that are bifurcated. They're, extreme on both sides. What do we do about making this better? As leaders of companies and academic institutions, what are the steps to try to address this?
I think it always starts with a shared vision. if their vision is right, so that everybody is really part of it, understands it, and there always needs to be a rational argument and also the emotional one. You need to also understand with the heart. And therefore, it is very much depending on that vision. If I now would ask the question, what is the vision of the European Union? What is the vision of Germany? Could anybody please tell me? Then there might be some answers, but not very accurate ones. And I think that we do have some things which are great here. Normally you build a concept for a company, for a country, on strength. What is a strength here? I mean, if I walk through the streets of Munich, it's different than walking through the streets of San Francisco. So I mean, that's a positive here. Living here is fantastic. So if we make it a great place to live, that would be one part. And we are already pretty good on that one. Be it sustainability, be it green, be it public transport, be it security, all of that. The second one, also make it a great place to learn and work. Yeah, so universities, some very good ones, but only few, much better ones in the US. Learning IT courses for kids not existing, not really existing. So I mean, learn and work. We need to do something there. And then it's infrastructure, so. And it's really hard to understand that we are now, and that's what I'm taking from...
I am not going to sit here as an American and have you describe German infrastructure as so-so. That just doesn't work.
That's true. But you know what I do not understand, we're sitting on 15 billion on subsidies and nobody's using them. It's just money on the table, nobody using it. We should have ideas for that one. And then the last point, it's venture capital, it's capital.
Yeah.
Where there's capital, there is ideas. Where you find ideas, you have companies. Where you have companies, you have jobs. It is ridiculous that Germany is having lower venture capital than France. I mean, you find a president, you find a president in France writing an article in Wired around artificial intelligence. Where's our politician writing around that one? So I mean, this is something where I really believe if we ignore that, there's plenty of money, international money. But why in the second and third phase in the C round, all the companies are leaving Europe? Spotify, now New York. Booking.com, now Priceline US. So I mean, that's something I think that we should have the biggest fund in the world, or at least having as much as the Vision Fund. So 100 billion for Europe would be a decent amount, and then being invested in Europe and beyond that also in the world. Generating momentum, because we need to believe in ideas. Only ideas and innovation are generating future. And I mean, this is what you mentioned it before, Amy. Don't panic, innovate.
Right.
Think what you could do. How to use technology for sustainability. How to use technology against, I don't know what, but many things. And I think we are not doing that in the best and most accurate and future-oriented way. And here we missed the path and should be much better.
Okay, Andrew, you're describing people being left behind in the U.S. or despair. What do we do about that?
Let me talk about what we do know about first, because that's kind of an easier question to answer. And I very much agree with all that. And one of the things that we've generally been pretty good about in the States is becoming a magnet for entrepreneurial talent, for people who want to grow a company to a very real size, and for risk-seeking, risk-tolerant capital to come meet those entrepreneurs. We've done a really good job of that. By the way, if you wanted to erode that, you would follow our immigration policies right now.
Currently, sure.
If you really want to make that go away, just look at what we're screwing that up, but we still have it. Another playbook that we're getting pretty badly wrong is what to do about this geographic concentration. Our cities are becoming very desirable places to live. Are we building enough housing for middle-income, lower-income people to come live in SF in New York, Boston? No, we are not. We're just screwing that up. Our infrastructure, I always love Tom Friedman's line that when you travel from Beijing to LAX, it's like going from the Jetsons to the Flintstones. So we're screwing that up, right? So we know the playbook for doing these things right, and we're not following it. Now, the reason I'm stalling is because you asked a really tough question. I don't think we know what to do about the playbook of people feeling so profoundly left behind, what to do with communities that just aren't as economically relevant as they used to be. Economists are not a shy lot, as you well know. When you go ask economists about okay, give us the playbook for restoring economic vitality to a community that's been left behind, that playbook is not very long right now. So we need to figure that out. I don't think it's an America-only problem.
And I mean, maybe a follow-up on the capital and venture capital question. I think there's a huge thing which could be changed in Europe and in Germany especially, because in the US it's normal that insurance, banks, foundations, they're using the money, and the money can be used and will be invested into startups.
Oh yeah.
Here it's forbidden. It's forbidden.
Forbidden.
So that it's forbidden. And you're generating two things. One is this money, so in insurances, they're sitting on a lot of money, the same with banks. It's not allowed to them to do that.
Okay, got it.
Because it's not an asset class they're allowed to invest in.
Interesting.
Which is stupid. It's just stupid. If you would be enabling everybody to invest the money, then you would invest the money in the place where you live. You would have billions, multi-billions to be invested, like in the US. And this other thing, the pension funds, they're investing in some Staatsanleihen of Greece or some other stuff. And this is seen as risk-free. Interestingly, risk-free. So it doesn't make sense. And the return is zero. So if you have your money, all your money on your Sparbuch, on your normal saving account, then you get a return dividend yield of 0.1 to whatever percent if you're happy. This means that people having their money there at the pension fund or at the Sparbuch, it will be a difficult and tough situation for them if they are old, if they're retired, because they're losing that money. It's not growing, they're losing money. And so, I mean, this is unfair, and nobody talks around that. Why? Because somehow shares are not liked by many politicians, which is not logic, it's not rational, and it's wrong. And so that's something where really we could improve. Very simple. It just takes some courage. It just takes some decision making, and then you would get that one, at least that one.
Can I ask a follow-up on this?
Sure.
Is it still the case that as a young person in Germany, for example, if you're part of a business that fails, that's not great news for the rest of your career?
I would say yes. Which is bad. And I mean, in the US, it's called experience and know-how, and here it's called you failed, you're a loser. So I mean, it might have been and gotten a little better. So it's not that harsh anymore, but it's not a great story. If you are starting your company, some GmbH, whatever, and you fail, people remember. People talk around that, and it's clearly seen in a, call it negative connotation.
Got it. Because one of the striking things to me when I go out and talk with my friends in Silicon Valley, they've all been associated with a company that failed, that went nowhere. And it could not matter less. It's just no black mark on their
I want to challenge that. So
yeah?
I teach at Stanford Business School. I teach entrepreneurship in the business school. And failure there's definitely tolerance for failure, but you can't fail the same way over and over again. You can fail once and learn something and come back around. You can fail differently. You can fail wisely. You can do experiments, right? But I do think that there are different ways. All failure is not equal.
Yeah.
Right? So just want to challenge
Don't
that
fail twice exactly the same way. That's a bad.
I want to follow up on one of the things, Hannes, that you said about political leaders, because it feels to me, living in Silicon Valley and running a company there, that our technology industry does very well, but our political responses in the city of San Francisco and et cetera, in the state of California. California is the 5th largest economy in the world, so we beat out France, for example. It's a large economy to manage, but our business and political leaders don't always work together that well. And you mentioned political leaders. How do you think that works in Europe?
I think that there are areas where we're really trying to find common commitment and alignment on certain things. I mean, that's a good democratic process. I love that one. So that's really good. It is clear that politics and governments need to be caring. So support people who need help, health systems, medical services, etc. So I think around that one, that's a good setup. Could always be better, but overall, I think the direction is a very humanistic direction, which is excellent. And what I really depressed me, for instance, in California, which is, I mean, California is really strong. I mean, it could be a country in Europe and a strong country in Europe. So a great, successful federal state. If you are there, for instance, Santa Monica, you see people sleeping at the beach, then going to some shower rooms, whatever, taking a shower, putting on the tie, suit, and go to work. This for me is depressing. And that's something, I mean, would you find it here? Maybe not to that aspect and not so many. So therefore, this humanistic aspect, I think, is a very important one, and this has been taken care of by politicians, by companies, by society. What I also believe is that we are over-regulated. Yeah? We are known for TÜV. TÜV is great, but too much TÜV is not great. And so that's, yeah. And therefore, we need to move out of this over-regulation. I mean, it's not necessary to regulate everything and to do it on very high level. We need to see some market dynamics. If we are missing the market dynamics, that's not good. And therefore, it should be in a social context, but market dynamics are super important, and we should see more.
But I also think you're moving in the right direction in some important areas there. I kind of walked around with this naive American idea that we had a real free market and the Europeans were all bound up with regulation and there wasn't much competition. That's actually wrong in some really important ways. The competition in the airline industry in Europe is really fierce, which is fantastic news for customers. The competition in telco and communication is extremely fierce, which is great news for all the consumers. Probably is not fantastic for you.
We had the discussion before, and I said, I mean, we always thought in the US it's great service, it's very competitive, and great prices and tariffs. No, it's not. So I mean, the average revenue per user in Germany is 25 euros for a mobile customer, and it's 80, 90 in the US. So it's way more expensive.
Right.
So I mean, that's the negative there. But the other thing which is relevant, and here I think Europe and Brussels needs to move on competition law. I mean, we've discussed the Siemens-Alstom thing, which was a mistake. But we have a similar situation. We have 127 mobile operators in Europe. You have 3 in the US, 3 or 4, depends on what the decision will be for Bonn. And in China, 3. So 3, 127. What does it mean? Have a look at the cash flow of these players. Of course, it's lower. And does that really make sense? To talk around Europe and then to think nationalistic, that's stupid. So I mean, here there's clearly an area for improvement, but it depends on the construction of the European Union. And therefore, as long as the head of nations are setting the rules, you want to have the money at your finance minister for licenses, for spectrum, for the mobile operators. So I mean, that's something, but we need to think. I mean, do we want to be a global player on global relevance? Or should it be a national something?
But
that's super relevant.
Can I say one quick thing? Both of those numbers, 3 and 127, are a lot better than 1 from the point of view of the customer. And for my internet service at home, I've got exactly 1 company that I have to beg to take decent care of me.
Okay, so I want to ask a question about incumbents, large legacy businesses, because especially in turbulent times, companies that are on top don't often stay on top. There are reports out there saying that half of the Fortune 500 will be gone in 5 years by 2025. The churn rate is just super high. So how do you think about that, managing through turbulence?
I think the topic of legacy is a big one, and I really believe that what you mentioned, monopolistic situation, is bad. It's bad for innovation, it's bad for consumers, clearly bad. The same for old legacy stuff. If there's no new things coming, it's boring, it's no innovation. And so therefore, I think one of the most difficult things are to ignore legacy and make a move into the future. It is the same for countries. If you once have a system set up and they are used to, I receive normally 100 million from the Bundesbudget money, it's difficult to only give them 60. They just would not understand it, it would be a big riot, it would be a big thing. So therefore, legacy can be dangerous. It can endanger your future. And therefore, if you are not anymore looking into the future and having that very clear vision, that very clear understanding, and also follow that with clear decisions, then you are in trouble. And it could be for companies, it could be a huge billing system which we are running. It's super difficult then to bring something new in. Why? And it's so human. People are working for that legacy system technology, and they know what to do. It's their job. That's what they learned. This new stuff, the machine learning or whatever which is coming in, they don't know it. And so why? So they will protect that, and they will find 1 million arguments to keep the old stuff. And so therefore, it is difficult for countries, for companies to really move in the future and make hard and tough decisions.
Right.
But you need to.
Okay, so we're running tight on time. I want to ask a final question, which is the theme of DLD this year is what are you adding? So I'll start with you, Andrew. Like, what are you adding to try to move this societal position forward?
He's writing books.
Yeah, and
you're writing books and you're teaching at MIT.
And you know, for you and me, this is always a tough question because we're kind of not putting goods and services out there in the economy. We're writing books and trying to get ideas out there, but ideas do move the needle over time. And Victor Hugo has this great quote. He says, "A nation can resist invasion by an army. It cannot resist invasion by an idea." So that comforts me a little bit, I guess.
Okay, and Hannes? So 5G, I know infrastructure is...
Yeah, I mean, what are we adding? What should I add? I think, I mean, there's this famous saying, Bert Brecht once used it, but also some others. You would like to leave the world a little better than it was before. And I think, I mean, this is great. If you do some inventing, to invent, to do, so do something, invent something, initiate something which makes the world a little bit better. It could be around sustainability. I think we all have clearly a responsibility around that one. That also means future. And the other one is, of course, for us, it's infrastructure. I mean, it's the job, it's the position, it's around, I mean, we are bringing gigabit to the country. I do remember 4 years ago, everybody in Germany said 50 megabit is enough. And we said no, 1,000 is enough for the moment. And then we moved to 10 gigabit and then to 100. And that's something you need to think big to move things. If you are complacent, you're not moving anything. And therefore, making things a little better, contribute personally. Sometimes it needs to hurt a bit or a lot. And so that's something where we should add something to society, to companies, leave a legacy, be it gigabit, be it 5G, fantastic infrastructure. It will totally revolutionize our industry. I mean, the industry with Internet of the Things, with edge computing, with 5G, with things connected to 5G, the industry production of the future will be totally different. Why? At the moment it's Wi-Fi in the production halls. In the future it will be 5G. Wi-Fi is losing data packets, so it's not precise. 5G is precise. It's not losing anything. So I mean, this is just some ideas why it's better. And therefore, I think that should be roughly the direction.
And do you have a piece of advice for those in the audience? Final piece of advice to navigate through turbulence?
I always fall back on a quote that I've heard attributed to a few different people, including Václav Havel, the president of Czechoslovakia. He said, "Seek the company of people who search for truth. Run from those who have found it."
Do you have a last piece of advice?
Top that.
Well, well, I think, I mean, what is always good, and I mean, that's not new, but do what you love. I mean, you're just better in doing that. And then think not only for yourself, but in a bigger context. I mean, that is good for you and good for others. And that's something which always helps.
And go forward and definitely work together. I think we need to look for more common ground to be together. So help me thank the panel.
Amy,
go
thank
forth
you.
and prosper.
Thank you, Amy.